So I'm curious of this New York Giants quarterback battle, right?
Yeah.
Because they've at least admitted at this point that Eli Manning does need a future. Like he's not 100% ready to go for the future for the next few years. We draft Daniel Jones at 6 overall, so we clearly think that at some point in the impending future there is a quarterback change that needs to happen.
Right.
Now the question is, what is Daniel Jones going to look like? Because the PFF grades were not exactly kind to him. He was getting better. Like last year was reasonable.
Yep.
But that's some way shy of the number 6 overall pick is all we were saying. We would pick that guy in the second round, for example.
Right.
But even if they drafted a quarterback in the second round, regardless of who it is, you would probably be looking at this team and saying, all right, I mean, we know what Eli is, which is not good at this point. Can a second-round quarterback show enough in camp to be putting him under pressure as we get into the season?
Right.
Because let's face it, over the first month of the season, Eli Manning is unlikely to be playing at a Pro Bowl level. And if the Giants are losing, there's going to be pressure on them to replace him in the lineup with whatever quarterback behind him had looked like they were the better option.
Right.
So I'm just generally interested to see if Daniel Jones can have a spectacular training camp, and if Eli Manning doesn't, how much pressure comes on them to make a switch.
Well, this is the whole interesting part about training camp, too, because it doesn't really matter what Eli does, right? The reason why we're in this situation is because they looked at Eli Manning and said, well, we were at OTAs, and he makes NFL throws. I just saw him at OTAs in May, and the guy still has it. That's why you can't, because he could go to training camp and have a pretty good few weeks. He still throws a deep comeback. He still throws the ball up the seam. Of course, he's an NFL, he's still a top 32 quarterback in the world, so he's going to make NFL-type throws. So we cannot overrate Eli Manning's performance in the preseason. At this point, you should say he is what he is.
Right.
Daniel Jones is the story.
The other interesting thing, though, is the effect that media has on the whole narrative and pressure angle. So you're right. You're 100% right that nothing Eli Manning does in the next few weeks of training camp should have any bearing whatsoever on whether they make the switch to Daniel Jones. But it does, right? Because if he has a stinking training camp, if he spends 3 weeks just drilling the ball at linebackers, throws a million picks, basically doesn't do anything good, there's the overwhelming pressure from the New York media will be to make a switch at quarterback heading into the season. And as much as you want as an organization to be like, we have to blot that out and not paying it any attention, they don't. They will pay attention to that.
Especially in New York.
That pressure does have a material impact on what you do as a team. So that's the other sort of fascinating narrative about all this, is that what things that happen in training camp that shouldn't really impact the decisions you make will, because of the pressure that comes on you from the outside as an organization.
Right. I think I think the teams that treat training camp for what it is, which is overall a small sample size and overall something that should not sway whatever you thought going in. Assuming your baseline is good, this is where I think we struggle, right? Because we keep saying, hey, rookies are what they are, right? They're not going to change a whole lot. But I feel confident that it's to say that because I feel like we've got a good baseline of what they are. Assuming you have a good baseline of what players are, even if a guy has a great training camp or a bad training camp, it should only move the needle a little bit. It's not like, hey, this guy who we thought was the 12th best wide receiver on the team is now the best wide receiver. You're not making that type of move, but maybe that guy wins the 5th wide receiver spot because he, elevated himself a little bit. It's trying to keep all of that stuff in perspective. The teams that do that best and don't overrate what they see, I think will build the best rosters, because that's what they're all trying to do. They're trying to find the best 53 that fit what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but you have to weigh that against the idea that when you get a guy in a completely different situation, he's just different to what you thought he was. Whether that's a free agent coming in who, put in a different scheme, is suddenly a transformed player.
There's something there, sure.
Or the same kind of idea coming out of college, guys who were just trapped in something that was making them look worse than they were. Suddenly when you surround them with NFL talent and, an NFL scheme, you're like, wow, this guy's actually a completely different player than we thought he was. It's understanding I think those ones are obvious.
But those are the ones where I'm saying
Prescott.
But I'm saying that the baseline was obviously wrong. Right. So if the baseline was wrong,
it's identifying when you have the baseline wrong.
Yeah, I understand.
Because you're going to want to take the approach of let's not overreact to everything we're seeing here, because we have faith in the system. And it's understanding when, okay, we had this one wrong from the outset. We need to make adjustments because this guy's clearly different than we thought he was.
Right.
It's that balance, right? The other one is, you're right. It's all about how good your calibration was. There was a story years ago that the Cowboys drafted this guy based off a blazing 40 time. They're like, this guy's got speed to burn. He's incredible. He's fast. They got him out in the field, like first practice. You're like, huh? This guy's supposed to run a 4.3 something. Where is this speed? And apparently they went out. They said to scout, they were like, hey, will you go back? It was like a local kid. They were like, hey, will you go back and measure the 40 that he ran at his pro day? Turned out he ran a 38-yard 40, and they drafted this guy based off like a 4.3 speed. So from that point on, whenever you go to pro days, somebody is out there with a tape measure making sure it's actually 40 yards. But that's
a smart adjustment.
Right. That's an example of, your calibration was off to begin with.
Yeah.
Your baseline was misled you. And once you got the guy in the building, you're like, okay, yeah, this is different to what we thought we were getting.
Yeah. So did you come up with a storyline, or you just said, I just want to see?
The Giants quarterback.
Oh, that's right. You said, okay. I forgot that was what spurred that whole conversation.
Yeah.
How about the Raiders? I don't think, so we talked about rookies and all that stuff. What about the Raiders? Four top 40 picks, 3 first rounders. Just want to see what they look like immediately.
Oh.
Is Cleveland Farrell going to be worth it as the 4th overall pick? Jonathan Abram, Trayvon Mullen.
That's not even the best story in the Raiders.
Well, it's a training camp fight.
Yes.
Obviously.
Richie Incognito going one-on-one against Vontaze Perfect, like practice after practice.
What if they're buddies and roommates? They could be roommates.
They could be. I just think you put those two together in blocking drills, you're going to see some fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
Poor old Cleveland Farrell on the sideline trying to marshal it all because of his leadership.
Well, that's what I really want to see.
Running out there with a whistle and a flag.
I want to see the leadership of Cleveland Farrell, Jonathan Abram, and Josh Jacobs, their first-round picks. I want to see their leadership.
Trying to control that chaos.
So the Raiders rookies, one of the bigger storylines of all of camp, because it was supposed to be it is a franchise-defining draft, either good, bad, or indifferent.
That's the key.
Right?
It is a franchise-defining draft. It just might not be defining it the way they want it to be.
So I think, and again, everybody's, you can't judge rookies until year 3 and blah, 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 blah. There's an element to that, but we're also in a world where the rookies have either 4 or 5 years to prove themselves. So if you truly are waiting until year 3 or 4, you're missing a part of their rookie contract. It is actually valuable to be good as a rookie and to be good in your second year. So a guy like Jerry Hughes, who became a very good player, was pretty much useless for 3 years. So that hurt his value to the Colts, and then they traded him, and they didn't get first-round value out of Jerry Hughes. It helps to be good as a rookie, and because the numbers keep pointing us to this, players don't change a ton. Some players get better, some players develop a little bit, but for the most part, they are what they are. So there is a first impression that is useful, and I want to see the first impression on Cleveland Farrell, Jonathan Abram, Trayvon Mullen. On the defensive side of the ball for the Raiders, I don't care that much about the Josh Jacobs first impression because, again...
Offensive side.
Yeah, interchangeable.
You said defensive.
I don't care about Josh Jacobs on the offensive side.
Yes.
I mentioned the 3 defensive players.
You did. But you said on the defensive side, I don't care about Josh Jacobs.
Yeah.
I don't care about him on the defensive side either.
Yeah, well, maybe he'll end up more valuable in defense. His development on the offensive side, though, of course, depends on how the offensive line and Trent Brown and some of these new guys, Incognito, how they run block for him.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Brown will be an interesting one to watch as well because, you take him away from offensive line Jesus over there in New England.
Yeah.
And now you say, okay, big man, fend for yourself in Oakland with, without an offensive line Jesus. How's that going to go?
Plus the quick drop backs, quick passing game, and all that stuff. So the Raiders have a few storylines to watch. Do you have one more?
Let's go with another training camp battle. Joe Flacco against, another
Locke.
quarterback. Any other quarterback, really.
I think Joe Flacco has a slight rejuvenation.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think there's a combination of the Broncos scheme. Mm-hmm. They're going to be running that outside zone play action scheme that we've seen elevate mid-tier quarterbacks over the last couple of years.
Before, in fact, right?
Yes, and the last time he had a good season was 2014 in the Kubiak scheme. Yeah. And we were sitting there in weeks 8, 9, 10 where he was like, hey, he's bounced back a little bit because here's Flacco's career. 2012, the year that they won the Super Bowl, he wasn't good until about week 15 or so. Then he went on a good stretch. And the stretch wasn't as great as the numbers showed, but it was a good stretch. It was the best stretch of his career. That was 2012. 2013, he was terrible. Again, I mean, he really dropped off. That was everybody's like, LOL, Flacco, too much money. Is he elite? No, it's terrible. And then 14, rejuvenation with Kubiak in that system. Intermediate passing game was pretty good. And then 15, 16, 17, and 18, pretty bad. I mean, he was a bottom third quarterback, but that was also with a terrible receiving core, and it looked like a guy that needed to have a ton of aggressiveness to his game. He needed to take some chances. It's Joe Flacco. He's not going to dink and dunk you on 15-play drives all the time. He's going to create chunk plays with a decent arm, not a cannon for an arm anymore. And he just didn't have that with the Ravens. So as much as we like to say, oh, Flacco's graded terribly, which he has, he deserves, blame for playing poorly over the last couple of years. He did have one of the worst situations as far as playmakers go for multiple years in Baltimore. So I could see a situation where you've got Cortland Sutton, you've got some young receivers, you have an emerging top 10 offensive line, I think, and you have a scheme that's probably going to elevate him a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying he's a top 10 quarterback. I just wouldn't be surprised if we saw a slight rejuvenation and there's a storyline at some point where it's like, hey, Joe Flacco looks the best he's looked in years.
Okay.
That's my take on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stole your story.
That's all right. I mean, I think that's a reasonable take. I could see that materializing. For the same reasons, I also think that Drew Locke is in a really good spot in Denver. I think that's a really good space for him to end up, or a good team for him to end up, particularly as a second-round quarterback that won't be immediately thrust into the action and basically just told, hey, you're the guy, go do it.
Very good situation.
So I'm just curious to see how that plays out, whether because there's no pressure on him, because he's not expected to be the guy from day one, he actually has an inside track to, showing his best self right from the get-go and, steals a march on Joe Flacco. But I could easily see they're both in good situations for the first time in a while.
Right.
Denver's quarterback situation is actually a good one for a quarterback to find himself in. Now they just need to actually find the quarterback, whether it's a slight bounce in Joe Flacco or whether it's because Drew Locke is in a good situation and he can develop, unlike some of these other first-round quarterbacks, remains to be seen.